this 18th meeting of the getting older 15th meeting of the Public Accounts Committee is now in order. Colleagues, we are here to study the Public Accounts of Canada 2015, and as per our procedure, we have before us our Auditor General, Mr. Ferguson, as well as Mr. Matthews, the Comptroller General of Canada. My understanding is both of you have opening remarks, and with that, we'll turn the floor over to our Auditor General, Mr. Ferguson. You now have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie de nous...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for allowing us to deal with the financial statements of the Government of Canada for the 2014-2015 fiscal year. I am accompanied today by Karen Hogan, Principal, who is responsible for the audit of the Government of Canada's consolidated financial statements. The audit of the Government of Canada's consolidated financial statements is an important aspect of government accountability. It is the responsibility of the government to prepare the consolidated financial statements. It is our responsibility to express an opinion on whether these consolidated financial statements are fairly presented. The Comptroller General will address any questions related to the government's consolidated financial statements. We will focus our comments on our audit opinion and our observations.
3 volumes. Our independent auditor's report and our observations are contained in Section 2 of Volume 1. Unless otherwise noted, the information in all other sections of this volume and the 2 other volumes is unaudited. Our independent auditor's report on the 2014-15 consolidated financial statements can be found on page 2.4 in Volume 1 of the Public Accounts. This marks the 17th consecutive year in which we have expressed an unmodified audit opinion. Pour l'exercice clos le 31.
For the year ending on 31 March 2015, the government adopted a new public sector accounting standard on liabilities for contaminated sites. Over the past few years, the government has started recording its liabilities for contaminated sites in anticipation of this new standard. Therefore, the adoption of the new standard did not increase the recorded liability, but did result in more comprehensive note disclosures.
Observations, we noted that the government has an extensive inventory listing of contaminated sites and of possibly contaminated sites, which supports the estimated liability. We concluded that there was room for improvement in the timeliness and refinement of the estimation process for contaminated sites. Regular updates are required as sites are remediated, as changes in environmental standards emerge, and as estimation techniques improve. Au cours des dernières années, nous avons également...
In addition, our observations over the past several years have highlighted concerns about the financial reporting of inventories at National Defence. Although the Department continues to make progress on several initiatives to improve its financial reporting capabilities, we continue to find errors.
Reporting concerns about inventories at National Defence, which are significant to the government's consolidated financial statements. This year, we noted a reduction in quantity errors, but we continued to find errors related to obsolescence and inaccurate pricing of inventory. We were pleased to see increased awareness of these issues and coordination by the Department's senior managers, who are beginning to take the steps needed to implement improved financial management controls. Strong internal controls reduce the risk of misstating the consolidated financial statements and making decisions without accurate information. The audit of the Government of Canada's consolidated financial statements is a large and extremely important one for our office. The time devoted to this audit is approximately 48,500 hours of work across several departments and agencies, which is carried out by more than half of our financial auditors. This work adds value by strengthening oversight, promoting transparency, and encouraging continuous improvement, all of which support the accountability relationships among departments and agencies and elected officials. Nous tenons à remercier le Contrôleur général.
We thank the Controller General and his staff and others in the departments, agencies, and Crown corporations who were involved with the preparation of these statements. A great deal of effort and work was required, and we appreciate the cooperation and assistance provided to us. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer the committee's questions. Thank you.
And now over to Mr. Matthews. Welcome, sir. Good to see you again back at our committee, and you now have the floor for your opening remarks.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et bon matin à vous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning to you and members of the committee.
To talk about the public accounts of Canada for the year ended March 31st, 2015. Je suis vraiment heureux d'être ici.
I am pleased to be here in my role as Controller General of Canada. With me today is Diane Parasini, Executive Director, Government Accounting, Policy and Reporting. And also there's Mr. Nick Leswick, who comes from the Department of Finance.
Financial statements of the Government of Canada, as Mr. Ferguson has just mentioned, for the 2014-15 year, in addition to other unaudited financial information. These are part of a series of reports to Parliament and the Canadian public, providing information on the state of the government's finances. Every year, the government presents the consolidated financial statements to the Auditor General of Canada, who audits them to provide an independent opinion to the House of Commons. Monsieur le Président, les Canadiens peuvent se fier.
Mr. Chair, Canadians can be confident in the accuracy of the public accounts.
Unmodified or clean opinion on the government's financial statements. This testifies to the high standards and quality of the government's financial statements and reporting, and is an achievement of which all Canadians can be proud. I would like to thank the members of the government's financial community for all of their work in helping prepare these consolidated financial statements. This is truly a piece of work that goes across the government. En outre, je tiens aussi à remercier le vérificateur.
In addition, I would also like to thank the Auditor General and his office for the continued professional working relationship that we have enjoyed.
It will be the first time some members of this committee will have been exposed to the public accounts. For that reason, we have tabled with the committee a short presentation to provide members with a quick overview, but I do understand that there was an information session already provided. If it does please the Chair, I'm happy to spend a few minutes to walk through the presentation, or the alternative is simply to leave it tabled with members and they can use it to ask questions as they wish. Peut-être deux points de plus avant de conclure.
Two additional comments before concluding.
To a certain page number in the public accounts. If you could be kind enough to provide us with that page number so we can also find the equivalent page number dans la version française ou anglaise.
The French and English versions as applicable.
I did mention these are a series of financial reports that are provided to House of Commons and the Canadian public at large. If Diane and I had brought all of the relevant copies of reports for today's appearance, you would not be able to see us. We would literally be hiding behind a wall of reports. Every year we sort of ask if there's information we're providing in the public accounts that members do not find useful, please tell us. Volume 3 of the public accounts contains information that you will not see published by any company in Canada. This is unique to the public sector. We are reluctant to sort of propose reductions in information because of openness and transparency, but if there are things that the committee sees, whether it's a threshold that seems too low or information that you truly don't find useful, please let us know when you do your study. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. And I'm in the hands of the committee as to the presentation you've got. I might suggest to colleagues that perhaps we wait till we've done our rounds and then evaluate how much time we've got and whether we want to just receive it or actually move into a session. Mr. Arya.
If it does not take too much time, I would prefer to have that upfront now, with the Comptroller General walking through it, rather than waiting till the end.
Sure. Okay. I'm in your hands. It's up to the committee. How long would the presentation be, Mr. Matthews?
I'm in your hands there. I can do it in 5 minutes. I can do it in 10.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, you know what? It's a good opportunity, too, for the public also to get part of this briefing. So, by all means, Mr. Matthews, we are going to take you up on your offer. And so if you'd present your presentation, and then I'll take a few questions on that presentation, so we've concluded that, and then we'll return to our usual rotation.
Mr. Chair, I'm sensing that maybe not everyone has a copy of the presentation, so
There's no time.
It's on your iPad. There aren't copies available. There wasn't an expectation. How quickly can we get copies?
No, we can share. We can share.
We share? Monsieur Gaudin, you're good?
Seulement pour vérifier, on parle bien du document.
Are we talking about?
So we're talking about the presentation for the Public Accounts Committee? Yes. The
Copy? Very good. All right, I see all colleagues are good. No further interventions. Mr. Matthews, if you'd be good enough to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will go through this quickly and just hit the highlights, and thank you for the opportunity. I've already covered the material on slide 2, so I'm actually going to start on page 3 of the presentation. Just to give you a sense of what is in the Public Accounts of Canada, we have broken this down for you in a pie chart in terms of where the money expenses happen as well as the assets are held by the government, and 3 kind of big buckets here for us. The biggest one is departments and agencies, and that represents $272.2 billion in spending and expenses during the fiscal year. The other 2 you'll see here relate to Crown corporations. So on the upper left, you'll see something called Enterprise Crown Corporations. And those are organizations like Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Export Development Corporation, that are basically self-sustaining. The final bucket, which is a smaller one, expenses of $8.3 billion, relates to Crown's corporations such as museums, CBC, and Via Rail, for instance. And the reason we've split those for you is to give you a sense of the spending, but also we account for those things differently. The organizations, the Crowns that are self-sufficient, we basically account for as assets. So if you looked in the public accounts statement of financial position or balance sheet, if you're from the private sector, you would actually see the Crown corporations like CMHC rolled up into an investment line. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. La prochaine page.
The next page, when we talk about the financial year, it starts as of the 1st of April and comes to an end on the 31st of March. And as I've already stated, we're studying today the financial statements for the year that came to an end on the 31st of December 2015.
If you feel like you're in 3 fiscal years at once, you're actually understanding what's happening. So we are wrapping up the year ended March 31st, 2015, and this is kind of the final piece of that. The public accounts were tabled back in the fall, but the Public Accounts Committee's study of those is very important. We are now in the process with our colleagues from the Auditor General of getting ready for the audit for the year that just ended March 31st, 2016. And at the same time, Parliament has already seen a budget, main estimates, and supplementary estimates A for the current fiscal year. The year started March 31st, 2016. So there are 3 things going on at once. Si vous demandez pourquoi...
If you're wondering why this requires a lot of time and several months in order to establish the financial statements for the government, the financial year comes to an end on the 31st of March.
Couple of things. We actually have a pretty good sense of expenses several months after year-end, but nailing down the revenue numbers is what takes the longest. And it's because our friends at the Canadian Revenue Agency have to process a certain number of tax returns before we can actually get a good estimate. And then also we have to give our colleagues at the Auditor General's office some time to go through that information and properly audit it. And the other piece, of course, is we do wait until Parliament is actually sitting before we table the Public Accounts of Canada. Page 5, just very quickly, roles and responsibilities, because they are a little confusing. It is a team effort, as I mentioned earlier. The Receiver General, which is part of what used to be called Public Works and Government Services Canada, and now is Public Services, they actually compile the data. They run the systems that actually produce these things, and they're responsible for the printing of the documents. Mon bureau, le Bureau du Contrôleur Général.
My office, the Office of the Controller General, is in charge of the accounting policies for the government.
The note disclosure for the financial statements. Department of Finance, and as I mentioned, Mr. Leswick is here. They're responsible for basically Section 1, which is the overview, discussion, and analysis of the financial results. So that's kind of the 3 organizations involved in the preparation. The Auditor General's office is responsible for giving an audit opinion on those financial statements themselves. And maybe we'll wrap up with slide 6, because there's no point in going through the numbers, I don't think, because we'll get to those later. 3 volumes, as was mentioned. Volume 1 is the consolidated financial statements of the Government of Canada. So what that means is statement of financial results, statement of financial operations, which is some old school people would call an income statement. It's revenues and expenses. You would see a statement of financial position, which some of us from the private sector many years ago would call a balance sheet, so assets and liabilities. So we're very much like the private sector in that regard. And you'll also see a statement of net debt and a statement of cash flow. And that's what the Auditor General actually audits. Volume 2 is where we actually get back to Parliament and tell them how much money they voted for each department and how much was actually spent. So Volume 2 relates back to the estimates. So it's where Parliament gets a chance to see what was voted, how much was spent, what gets carried forward. And Volume 3 is the volume I mentioned in my opening remarks, which is the volume that you will not see anywhere in the private sector, where we have a bunch of additional disclosure and information that is out there for your information. I think with that, we'll wrap it up. Just maybe to flag for you, there is some technical language here. At the end of this presentation, we do have a series of definitions that may help you. So if you're looking for technical terms. And we do have, before that, have some financial highlights to maybe just focus your attention. The point I would, and those are on slides 8 and 9. The point there you will notice, on slide 8 in particular, you'll see there's a budget. You'll see we compare that to the actual financial results achieved, and that's the initial budget that was tabled, as well as the actual results achieved the year before. And that's for the expenses and revenues. So it does give you a sense of what the budget was and then what the actuals were. Slide 9 that follows is on assets and liabilities. You'll notice there is no budget for those. That's just the actual results themselves. So the budget numbers are only relevant for revenues and expenses, not for assets and liabilities. And with that, Monsieur le Président, je vais conclure là.
So I'll conclude on that, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions from the committee.
Matthews, and thank you to our Auditor General and his department for being there. Also, I should welcome Mr. Leswick back from the Department of Finance. So if we do have questions, we have the Treasury Board present and the Auditor General's department present, as well as the Finance Department. So we'll move into the first round of questionings. Thank you for the overview of public accounts. We have, as you mentioned in your briefing, we have had other representation that have gone through the public accounts volumes with us. As new members of Parliament, many new members last fall, they would have received these 3 big volumes and opened it up and wondered, wow, what now? And so thank you for helping us to understand a little bit more about them. And we'll go into the first round of questioning. And Mr. Lefebvre, please, for 7 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. Question to the Auditor General. We reviewed the documents of the public accounts, and one of the main concerns that I have is your observations with respect to D&D. After 12 years, and you've been looking at this, and you're saying that there's been some improvements with respect to their inventory, and around $6 billion of the $7 billion of government inventory is with D&D, and yet for the past 12 years, they've had some major challenges in determining pricing and the obsolescence of some of the materials. What improvements have you seen? And my next question after that would be, are you intending to maybe do a full audit down the road of this, or has an audit already been done and they've given some recommendations in the past?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And certainly it's been an observation, as you said, that we've been making for a number of years. We have been seeing some improvements. I'll ask Ms. Hogan to give you some details on that. Remembering again that these observations are based on the bigger audit that we're doing of the consolidated financial statements of the government. So we do not get down into the level of detail of an audit specifically about, like a performance audit or something specifically about D&D inventory. That's something that we could consider. But I'll ask Ms. Hogan to provide some details about, some of those improvements or changes that we've seen over the past.
Thank you. Over the past year, we've been happy to see that senior management at Department of National Defense is now much more coordinated and focused together. There's an increased awareness of the concerns and the issues related to inventory. We're happy to see that the public servants and the military are now talking together and working towards improving the financial reporting around inventory. One of the things we did also notice was a reduction in errors when it comes to the quantity, so the actual items on hand. That chalks up to the fact that the department has started to do a lot more stock taking of high-risk items. They do it on a rotation basis, and so we're definitely seeing improvements there because they're taking a much more active interest in counting it. And
my question is, in the past 12 years, we've known that this is an issue. Why hasn't the performance audit been done on this?
I guess to this point we have simply raised it, continued to raise it as part of the audit observations. And as I said, it's something that we can consider is whether there would be more value if we looked at it more in depth in a performance audit. So I guess really all I can say is to this point, at least in my memory, we haven't done one. So certainly not in the recent number of years have we done one. But we'll take it as a suggestion to consider for sure.
Thank you. To the Treasury Board Secretariat, with respect to Crown corporations, from 2005, we see that the revenues that they've was at $7.2 billion, and in 2015 year is at $13.5 billion of revenues in the Crown corporations. How can you explain the huge increase of revenues in the sector over the last 10 years?
Maybe I'll start and see if my colleague, Mr. Leswick, wants to add in. Crown corporations, roughly the same number we've had. It's not an increase in the number of crowns, but some of the size has increased. So particularly, I'd flag your attention to, over that period, Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation has certainly grown. If you go back to the recession, for example, Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation was used as a vehicle to deliver stimulus to the economy, and so there was some growth there. But also the mortgage business in Canada in general has kind of grown over that period of time. So that's the one I would flag as, if you're going back kind of 10 years or so, is the one that's probably grown the most. Nick, you may wish to...
I'd only add a couple other points. One, foreign exchange gains. So a lot of Crown corporations hold financial assets in U.S. dollars. So when they translate them to a Canadian dollar equivalent for purposes of public accounts.
Some examples of which Crown corporations would have that?
Well, just our foreign exchange account in generally. So just our foreign exchange holdings held at the Bank of Canada, this is in order of magnitude of around $60 billion, of which some part of that, I don't want to put a number on the table, but like about half of it is held in U.S. dollar assets. So in 2014, with the market decline in the value of the Canadian dollar as a result, linked to the collapse in oil prices in the middle of that year, there was a depreciation in the Canadian dollar, which led to a revenue gain. Likewise, another point on that, CMHC in 2014 had a large disposal of its investment assets. So where it carries them kind of in an other comprehensive income line until disposal, it realizes the gain and brings it into its revenue line. Hopefully that was understandable, but it realizes the gain and brings it into revenue upon disposal, and that was a transaction in 2014 as well. And then lastly, I'd say the government of the day continued to dispose of its holdings in General Motors. So for the 14-15 year, that was in the order of magnitude of about $1 billion as well. So it gives you, coupled with what the Comptroller General said, it gives you kind of a sense of why the other revenues line topped out.
Yeah. One more question? Thank you. Liabilities, contaminated sites, environmental liabilities increased by $1.2 billion in 2014-2015. Can you explain why this big increase in that year?
Certainly. In the contaminated sites, the Auditor General has already touched on it. When you look at the contaminated sites inventory, changes in the valuation are to be expected. As you clean up sites, as you further assess things, estimates go up or down. There is roughly 6,600 sites that we have yet to assess. So understand that we book a liability once we've actually done an assessment to a certain point where we have some confidence in the number, and then that will change over time. If you think about Giant Mine or Faro Mine, very complicated cleanup. So as time goes on, the liabilities go up and down. Maybe the final point I'll leave you with is the vast majority of our environmental liability really relates to a handful of sites. So Faro Mine, Giant Mine, Esquimalt Harbor, and I've forgotten off the top of my head, there's one or two more, but I think it's about 65–70% of our liabilities probably relates to 4 or 5 sites. But for new members here, you will see changes in the environmental liabilities of the government as further assessments get done, as greater experience happens in terms of cleaning up. Generally, they trend upwards, but sometimes you have an initial assessment of a site that is very comprehensive cleanup required. Then they look at the environmental standards and you go, you know what, maybe we don't have to do that much, maybe we can do something different. So in other cases, it goes down. So every year we ask departments to update their estimates based on current information. As the Auditor General mentioned, there's a new accounting standard in place, so that drove some of the change for sure, because we did actually have to change our practices a bit, but it is quite normal for these estimates to change year to year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthews and Mr. Lefebvre. We will move over to the official opposition and to Monsieur Gaudin. Monsieur Gaudin, vous avez 7 minutes.
Mr. Gaudin, you have 7 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you for coming here today because it's always a pleasure to meet you and to have answers to our questions. So thank you very much for being here this morning. Reading what I have under my fingers today, it's music to my ears because the several times we come here to try and improve the efficiency within our government systems. And if I look at what is mentioned here today, the costs relating to the public debt have gone down by 5.8%, going from 8.2 billion to $26.6 billion. And so that's very positive. And if we look at your presentation, we're seeing that there's a reduction in terms of the GDP. And so that's important. And so this is tremendously important, and we can only be happy as a result of this. But Mr. Comptroller General of Canada, you're saying in your statement that this indicates the high level relating to the consolidated financial statements relative to what the Comptroller General said. It says that the standards are very high. What was done in the past was very positive. We established a system that was very effective, and now we're proceeding to fine-tuning. Is that what I must understand in all of this? Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. Well, I would say 3 things. First of all, the accounting standards since 2003 have changed, and we changed the accounting methods to resemble what exists in the private sector.
So we are always having to keep up with changes in accounting standards. Accounting standards are set independently in Canada, so we do follow accounting standards set by an independent board. So, le vérificateur général a déjà mentionné il y avait un changement.
The Auditor General said that there was a change in the accounting standards for contaminated sites.
The other thing I would say, we have roughly $270 billion in expenses and revenues depending on the year. There's always going to be errors found by the Auditor General. That's their job, is to go through an audit and challenge our estimates, find mistakes. Every year we learn, and every year we get better. But there is still work to do, especially on national defense inventory. That's been a challenge we've had for a number of years, and it continues to get better, but still not good enough. So it is a matter of continuous improvement for sure on the base, but also keeping up with the changes in accounting standards. Le troisième point, le point final pour moi,
the third point and the final point that we have to understand is that in order to prepare the financial statements,
science. We talked about estimating the environmental liabilities. You know, you're really projecting what it's going to cost to clean up a contaminated site, and they're all different. If you think about something like veterans' expenses and veterans' liabilities, we are trying to project the eventual cost of caring for our current group of servicemen and women and existing veterans. There's estimates involved in healthcare costs, in age, how many people will take up the services. So it is quite a complicated process, and we're always refining those estimates as we learn and get more exposure. So those are kind of the 3 things I would leave you with.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, sir. You've also stated that there was a change in terms of the standards as of 2003 that is closer to the private sector, and so it makes it easier for us to understand, quite honestly. So I'd really like to know your opinion relating to that change. Is it a positive thing, a negative thing? What are the advantages and the weaknesses? Well, it's a rather long story, but the private sector for years and years and years.
De la caisse?
D'exercice.
Merci beaucoup. Comptabilité d'exercice.
We use the private sector uses the accrual accounting method, and whereas the rest of the government used cash accounting.
Cash accounting, if you buy a car, you have an expense of $20,000 the year you buy it. Under accrual accounting, you would depreciate that vehicle over 10 years, 5 years, however you're using it, so you would have amortization expense. It's more complicated than that, but that's a simple example. Ce changement-là était vraiment positif.
These changes were tremendously important to understand all the assets and liabilities of the government, and it put emphasis on the assets and liabilities in a way that didn't exist in the past.
Being said, that was a massive change, and any change like that requires an awful lot of work. So it was not done overnight, many years of preparation, and it does, help us follow best practices, and the standards are independently set, so it was a good practice. That being said, Parliament still votes funds to departments on a cash basis. And so that subject comes up frequently for debate is the estimates. Le budget de dépenses du gouvernement utilise une
The budget, the expense budget of the government uses the cash accounting method because it's easier to understand. But the financial statements
standards for the public sector, but they're very, they're accrual-based, comparable in a sense to what happens in the private sector.
Je vais y aller rapidement. Je vais profiter.
I'm going to go quickly, and I'd like to inform you at this stage, and I would also ask you to make this message go through to the appropriate people, but I think it's through the Controller General of Canada that you produce this document. It's not you, it's the Receiver General. No, it's us. But I'd like to draw to your attention to the fact that the numbering of pages in French and in English is not the same, and we can't find our way through these documents. I don't know if this has been noted, but I'd like for us to take the necessary measures to ensure that we have the same references and articles in the both documents. Thank you very much.
Mr. Christofferson, please, for 7 minutes. And thank you for filling in for me when I was at another appointment this morning.
My pleasure, Chair. Thank you very much, and thank you for the floor. And thank all of you for being here again. Once again, it is worth underscoring and shouting from the rooftops that the country has its 17th straight clean audit, and regardless of what party is in power, this is great news for Canada. It also underscores why the World Bank, WTO, and others are pushing, especially emerging democracies, to strengthen their Auditor General public account system for those that have the Westminster-style parliamentary system. Because basically what this tells Canadians is, at the very least, nobody's stealing the money that should be going into the public bank account. That's between the money being sent here and being received, there's no interference. And we know there are countries where long before that money ever gets into the national treasury, it's off into some offshore account somewhere and literally stolen. So that clean audit is important. It needs to be underscored. Now, that's separate and apart from the performance audits, which is where we dig in and find out how well the money that was not stolen was spent. However, I do take great pride in being a member of Parliament in a G7 country that produces its 17th clean audit in a row. That is impressive, and all involved on the political side, but I would say especially on the bureaucratic side, the staff. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do on behalf of Canadians. It's appreciated, and it's reflected in this 17th clean audit. So, moving on. Having said all that, things are still not perfect. We need to continue to persevere. And national defense continues to be one of our biggest problem children. And in this particular file, again, 12 years, and I'm going to pick up where Mr. Lefebvre was, and then we see from the Auditor General things like they're beginning to take the steps needed. I mean, that's nice to see, but in the context of a problem that's been around for 12 years, it's not overly encouraging. So the one thing I wanted to ask Mr. Ferguson is, it says they're beginning to take the steps needed. Was there any obvious impediment to them taking these steps, I don't know, 12 years ago?
Well, I think we have over time seen the department take the steps at different times, different levels of speed. I think what we are pointing out now is that we feel that the department is engaged in this. We have seen improvements, particularly in their count of the inventory, so knowing the quantity of inventory. We are, though, still concerned that they are making, what I would call in some cases fundamental pricing errors. So, to get a number for the financial statements, you have to know how much of something do you have and how much did it cost in order to put that value on it. And we were finding, still some fundamental errors in just using the wrong numbers and putting the price on them. Also, some problems with identifying what pieces of inventory are obsolete versus, that are still usable. So we've seen significant progress, I think, on the quantity side. There are still some improvements that they need to make on the pricing and the obsolescence side. Fundamentally, we would have liked to have seen much better progress over the last 12 years. But given we are where we are, as Ms. Hogan mentioned, we are now satisfied with the importance the department has put on this. We're satisfied with the progress they've made on the quantity side, but they still need to do more work on the pricing and on the obsolescence assessments.
Are you satisfied they're on the right track with the pricing and obsolescence?
It is a very complex bucket of inventory. It's not your typical widget in D&D, obviously. So we're pleased that they're making some progress, and there's still a big road to go.
When do you think they'll have it solved?
I think that would be better asked to the Department of National Defence or to the Controller General.
Controller, Mr. Matthews?
If I could add just a few points, because Mr. Christopherson, or the President, this member has raised this issue repeatedly, and he's right to do so. This is 12 years. Couple of thoughts for you. D&D is the biggest inventory holder we have. They actually, if I recall correctly, have over 200 million parts they're actually tracking. We're not going to solve this with manual intervention. This is a systems issue. They had two systems, one to actually record the inventory and track where it was, and a second one that did the pricing. They have recently made some improvements on the systems side, which will help us. The other piece, and the one that I'm preoccupied with, is I care very much about how old the errors are. D&D is still tracking parts that date back to World War II. They're in the system. They're probably not relevant anymore. Now, I don't know that, but I'm speculating here. So I get fussed when I find out are the errors on relatively new purchases, or are they on stuff that dates back to 1964? It's the new stuff I care more about. And so we are in discussions with National Defence about, and the Auditor General mentioned obsolescence. Maybe there's a certain bucket of parts we should just write off, move on, let's be done with those, and figure out what's no longer relevant, and just start fresh with the relevant things. And that's a massive undertaking itself. But to fix this, I think that's what we need to do.
Okay. A long time before, in another life, before I got into elected office, I actually worked in a parts department for International Harvester trucks. So I know a bit about parts and tracking them. And I know it's a massive undertaking, but I also know it can be done. And you right down to the last little lock washer, you can actually, and I'm talking about systems that were in place, back when I didn't have any gray hair, which is quite a while ago now. All right, so I would assume then from both of you, this is an ongoing watch, and we can expect to hear further updates as you're getting evaluations from them?
Yes.
Yes, very good. Time, Chair?
1 minute.
1 minute. Very good. Okay, I'd like to return to the issue of the environmental liabilities increasing by $1.2 billion in 2014-15. And you mentioned, I think it was Mr. Matthews mentioned that 4 or 5 sites account for about 65 to 70%. my notes are correct. Is that a mix of public and private-owned land, or is it more one than the other?
The big ones, Mr. Chair, were private at one stage, but the government is always the ultimate risk holder in these cases. So if you think about Faro Mine and Giant Mine, these were initiatives that were at one stage in the private sector's hands, and in fact the government now has basically responsible for that. The other big ones, because I did find my list, Mr. Chair, Port Hope and Port Granby are the other two I'd mentioned, and I did mention the Esquimalt Harbour. So the Esquimalt Harbour, I think, has traditionally been public sector owned. Some of these other ones are things the government inherited from private sector organizations that went bankrupt, or environmental standards were quite different way back when. But Giant Mine and Faro Mine together are over $2 billion. So that's kind of the big chunk of this liability.
I'm kind of troubled by the fact that it used to be private when it was profit-making, and then suddenly when there was a liability, lo and behold, it becomes the property of guess who? The Canadian taxpayer. So I just want to drill down a little bit. If I don't have a lot of time.
No, actually,
I'm not going to do any drilling in my chair.
The drilling is done.
Anyway, I was hoping to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go back to the government side, Ms. Shanahan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here this morning. And I'd like to understand a little bit more about what performance measures that we should be looking at in the statements. And so if I go to debt to GDP ratio, whoever would like to walk us through a little bit what we should be looking for there and comparables with other countries.
I think that's probably best answered, Mr. Chair, by my colleague from the Department of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question. The debt GDP ratio is effectively, a crude metric, so debt on top, as we calibrated just the total kind of accumulated deficit of the federal government over the size of economy. So really, it just gives you an indication to both, to two primary audiences. One is investors, folks that hold our bonds and expect coupon payments on our debt, and second is to taxpayers. So the debt GDP ratio is effectively the general debt dynamics of the country. What's our ability to service our debt based on the size of our economy? So where we had, I guess, more adverse debt dynamics in the 90s through fiscal consolidation efforts on the part of both governments over the last decade and a half, we've got our debt GDP ratio down to about 30%. So debt, the net debt of the federal government, represents about 30% of the total size of the economy. So it gives you a sense of our ability to service our debt obligations.
So when we compare that with other OECD countries, what do we?
So that comparison is on page, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure that everyone has the right page in front of them.
1.20.
Yeah, 1.20. So to get to a level of international comparability, there has to be some kind of inputs and outputs so that we're all talking about the same type of debt. Like, just for basic understanding, we have a highly decentralized federation in the sense that there's a lot of spending obligations that rest with the provinces compared to a place like Germany, which is highly centralized. So to get to a comparable total government level kind of net debt GDP comparison, there has to be some kind of, we have to establish this international comparability to get to the same kind of calculation for net debt. But to answer your question directly, you can see that, far and away Canada has the best kind of debt dynamics of our G7 partners.
So is this a level of concern? And I guess I would ask that to the Auditor General. When we're looking at risks going forward, is this a level of concern?
Well, I think if you look at the front section of Volume 1, the Financial Statement Discussion and Analysis section, I think you see significant improvement over the last 20-odd years in terms of the performance of the federal government. I think it is important, as was just mentioned, that when looking at things like level of net debt to GDP, to remember that in Canada there is only one taxpayer, so the level of debt of the provinces is also important when making that comparison to total GDP, because the GDP for the country is what it is. So I think there has been significant improvement. I think there's always been sort of a bit of an issue of trying to identify what is an appropriate level of net debt to GDP. I don't think anybody has ever sort of said, this is what a country's net debt to GDP should be. You know, I think the risk lies with things like interest rate increases. You know, you can see that in 2015, out of $280 billion worth of spending, $26 billion is on interest expense. So, you know, if there were significant increases in interest rates, you know, which would be accompanied by increases in inflation, of course, but those types of things could cause a significant impact on the federal government's bottom line. So fundamentally, I would say, you know, there's been significant improvement. I think, you know, the government is in a good place at this point, but there are risks to be aware of.
Okay, very good. Time? Yeah.
Matthews was going to answer as well
excellent.
there.
If I may, just quickly, you did ask about performance measures, the question. So debt to GDP comparing to other countries is a good one. The other one that might be relevant for you, if you're looking for an independent one, credit ratings. So actually look at, you know, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and the credit ratings of the various institutions. You know, Government of Canada is as good as it can be. So that's, if you're looking for sort of an external validation, that might be a useful source.
Excellent. And just a quick question. You mentioned something, Mr. Leswick, concerning one-time, one-off gains, and I'm just wondering where we can get a better picture of, are there special notes of that effect when we have a large disposal or gain or loss on assets? And I also want to ask you about where would I find the marketable securities that are contained? We're looking at the venture capital program, and where would I find the valuation of those assets that are within that program?
To answer your first question, the financial statement discussion analysis should give you some picture in terms of, I guess at the highest sense, in terms of some of the one-off gains. We reference these one-off gains to other revenues in the context of Crown corporations here. For more detail, you'd have to go levels deeper into some of the departmental financial statements to understand what was the nature of these gains in places like CMHC or or other places, quite frankly, the Bank of Canada with respect to our foreign exchange gains and losses. To answer your second question on venture capital, I would just submit to the chair I could work with the clerk to provide you more detail in terms of the valuation of our venture capital program, but that is housed in BDC. So if you went to BDC's financial statements, you would see how they have their initial investment and the valuation allowances against that initial investment. I was just looking at that a couple of weeks ago, so it's fairly clear in the footnotes.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah.
Shanahan, we will now go to Mr. Poilievre, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. One of you were talking about CMHC and the increase in the size of its book over the last decade. I think it was you, Mr. Matthews. Are you concerned with that increase?
If you look at our Crown corporations, Mr. Chair, they operate under very strict parameters. So in terms of the expansion I referred to under CMHC, it was actually deliberate growth, if you will, in terms of additional programs implemented by the government of the day to actually increase the liquidity in the Canadian financial markets. So it was not like it was done without notice. It was actually deliberately done, and they were the vehicle of choice. So if you ask me, am I concerned about their size? From a financial risk perspective, you know, lots of articles these days about the mortgage industry in Canada, etc. I would be concerned if I had a Crown corporation that was operating outside of its legal mandate, taking on programs we weren't aware of, but this was very much, I would call it, deliberate kind of growth, and Mr. Leswick may want to know.
When you talk about policy decisions to expand liquidity, are you talking about the mortgage purchase program that happened during the height of the recession?
That would be one example, yes.
That was approximately $75 billion?
If I recall correctly, I think you're in the ballpark, but I'm not, I can't say I'm certain.
The book of CMHC right now is just over $500 billion, I think?
It's in that neighborhood, yes, and their financial statements are disclosed. One of the things I did not mention, Mr. Chair, is that the Auditor General does do individual audit opinions on all the Crown corporations, so there is specific information out there on CMHC.
What portion of the growth in the book is accounted for by the liquidity program that we mentioned earlier?
I'd have to undertake to get back to you unless, I suspect Mr. Leswick doesn't know off the top of his head, but we'd have to get back to you to sort of isolate the impact of those programs on the overall size of CMHC. And some of those programs, to be fair, have been unwound, but that was the actual, a really good example of an event that actually was deliberate growth. And then there is also the growth of the mortgage industry in general.
Anything to add to that?
I don't have the ratio on the tip of my fingers, but I think where the member's going is correct. I mean, the size in that the balance sheet's being driven by the size of the loan book in terms of CMHC's underwriting of mortgages with high loan-to-value ratios.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, my colleague may have some information here.
So according to CMHC's published annual reports, the Economic Action Plan in 2009 added about $1 billion in both 10 and 11 related to social housing and those types of initiatives. They also provided $2 billion in direct low-cost loans to municipalities. And then through Economic Action Plan 2014, the CMHC guarantees under the MBS mortgage-backed security program went up to $80 billion, and new issuances for the Canadian Mortgage Bond Program were $40 billion. And Economic Action Plan 2013, there was an investment of more than $1.25 billion over 5 years, starting in 2014 to extend investments in affordable housing. So there have been some sizable investments.
Okay, but those wouldn't explain those individual $1 billion or $2 billion investments in affordable housing would not be a large share of the $500 billion book of CMHC.
No, Mr. Chair, if the member's question around the actual size of the loan book, we'll have to get back with a little bit of analysis for you if that's acceptable,
And
Mr. Chair.
have you examined at all CMHC's securitization program?
I have not, and I can't speak to whether the Auditor General has looked at that as part of their audit.
Not the program specifically. The audit that we would do at CMHC would again be on the financial statements and expressing an opinion as to the fairness of the presentation of those financial statements, so making sure that all those programs have been properly accounted for.
The interest cost, the interest ratio of the Government of Canada right now is just over 9 cents. For every dollar in revenue, we have about 9 cents in interest expense on Canada's national debt. How does that compare historically?
I'll start, and Mr. Leswick may wish to add in. But if you look right now, on revenue of roughly $280 billion, the interest expense, and I lost my number. Let me get Diane to grab that for me.
27 billion.
27 billion, thank you. So in 9 cent ballpark, as the member mentioned, Mr. President. Interest expense in general has been going down because we are aware of there is low interest rates right now. Government does hold a mix of shorter term and longer term debt arrangements, so it's not all just the short term rate, but the interest rate itself is going down, and that has been driving down public debt charges. Anything you wish to?
No, just to reference page 1.9 in volume 1, which shows you the interest ratio and public debt charges since 1990, which shows the downward trajectory that Comptroller General was speaking
to. Given the term of the debt, the terms, I should say, and the timeframes of debt issuances of the Government of Canada, how long would it take for an increase in interest rates to translate into an increase in debt service charges?
Mr. Leswick.
Well, I mean, immediately, in the sense that, I mean, there's two reasons for this. One is as the Comptroller General was saying, we borrow across the yield curve. So, I mean, we have our debt management strategy, which tries to manage its cost and risk dynamics. One is cost. I mean, shorter term borrowing is less costly because we're borrowing at lower interest rates at the far left hand side of the yield curve. But we want to manage our risk dynamics in the sense that we don't want to roll over this stuff every 3 months because, we don't want to subject ourselves to the interest rate rollover risk. So we do borrow effectively steady across the yield curve. So to answer the member's question directly, if short-term rates went up, I mean, tomorrow, our short-term borrowing costs would go up tomorrow, so there'd be a direct impact almost immediately. However, you have to manage that in context of the entire $600 billion borrowing program, which is the entire value of our interest-bearing debt.
Thank you, Mr. Leswick, and we will now move over to Mr. Arya, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Ms. Hogan. The Auditor General made a statement on D&D. Strong internal controls reduce the risk of misstating the consolidated financial statements and making decisions without accurate information. In your opinion, do they have the strong internal controls today?
We do not do an internal control audit over their inventory. We do audit it substantively. As Mr. Matthews mentioned, there is room for improvement in the systems in order to ensure that inventory is more accurate.
Maybe I will ask Mr. Ferguson, in your opinion, do they have?
So as Ms. Hogan mentioned, when we audit something, a balance sheet item or, transactions in a set of financial statements, the first thing we will do is assess the internal controls to determine whether they are sufficient for us to rely on those internal controls when we are expressing our opinion. In the case of the D&D inventory, we do not rely on the internal controls. So they have some, and as I've said, they've been doing a better job in terms of some of their quantity pricing, but their level of internal controls is not sufficient for us to be able to say we can rely on those controls to be able to do what they are supposed to do. So they definitely need to improve on their controls as well.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to further explain that, the Government of Canada does have a policy on internal control that every department aspires to comply with because it is new, and well, newish in policy terms, several years old. D&D is targeting compliance by 2018-19, so it is they would admit themselves that they have a ways to go on internal controls, and as the Auditor General just underlined, the audit does not rely on that control environment, so it is a work in progress.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. My next question is on Volume 2, Section 9. I was trying to find out the amount of money that was allocated or spent under one of the programs called Canada Summer Jobs. I couldn't find it. In the last committee meeting, I was told that maybe we can find it on the website of the department. I went back and tried to find out. I didn't find it there. The same, as I said, Volume 2, Section 9 goes on to give details about a $2,000 item, but a major program information is not available either in this report or on the website of the department. How and where can I find it?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. This drifts into an interesting area. So that the way the government and the Parliament actually votes money, 3 buckets for most big departments: capital, operating, grants, and contributions. That's the vote structure. But associated with that, every department has multiple programs, many programs, and the member has highlighted one here for Canada Summer Jobs. The way, and I'm going out on a limb here, where you can find that information is every department produces what's called a departmental performance report, which is their actual results as compared to their planning information. And you will see information by program there. So we will look, and it should be in the departmental performance report that's on the department's website, but we will look and provide that information.
And on budget projections, in your opinion, during the last 10 years, what is the general trend of budget projections? Whether the governments underestimate or overestimate their projections?
Maybe I will start, and then I'll have, as I like to get the first word in and then give my colleague the chance to clean up. So when you look at budget projections, understand, revenue and expense base of roughly $280 billion, depending on the year. So plus or minus 10 billion is a lot of money, but as a percentage, pretty small stuff. So, understand that is some context, and because of the assumptions we have to make, it's quite possible that you'll see that. If you go back over history, the government has had a better track record in estimating expenses. Revenue is more problematic. The revenue estimates are tougher to do, but the reason varies by year. Some year it's the exchange rate, some year it's corporate taxes. And, the budget is done typically 2 months or so before the year starts. And in an environment where the economy is changing rapidly, it is tough to estimate. And I'll let Mr. Leswick see if anything to add there.
Just to say that the City Howe Institute does do a report card for all federal and provincial governments, and they grade us in terms of transparency and just general results, so results and bias and accuracy. And the federal government, we're number 2 at an A- we got in the most recent report card, so we do all right.
Okay, the last, I think I got a couple of quick questions if I have some time. Just to reconfirm, the $671 billion debt that is in the balance sheet, number 1, it includes guarantees. Number 2, it's a consolidated debt, includes from all Crown Corporation, including CMHC, but excluding Canada Post.
So my colleague Diane may have to help me on this, Mr. Chair, but in terms of the debt, it is all government debt where we actually have a legitimate debt that we think we will have to pay. So that's loans, it's pensions, it's accounts payable. We do consolidate our crowns in there, but we do have a different method of accounting for some crowns versus others, so I'll get her to weigh in on the CMHCs versus the Canada Post. The second piece on loan guarantees. Loan guarantees don't necessarily result in payments. So the actual debt number would not include loan guarantees. The loan guarantees are disclosed in the notes to the financial statements so you get a sense of the size, but they're actually not part of the debt unless we thought we would have a call on those. They'd be
liability?
They would fall into that category, and some we think might be realized, some we don't, and you'll see in the notes of the financial statement some detail on that. Diane, did you want to weigh in on debt for CMHC and Canada Post?
So both CMHC and Canada Post are accounted for in the same manner as Bill mentioned earlier in terms of we bring them in more like an investment. So their individual debt balances are not part of the government's debt line because they're reflected as an investment in the asset side. That being said, there are a number of Crown Corps that borrow from the federal government. I believe CMHC is one of them. I could be wrong. So therefore, because they borrow from the federal government, they effectively, their debt is part of our government's debt. So we can confirm back to you if needed, if CMHC was one of the 5.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Area. We will now go back again to the official opposition and to Mr. Poilievre, please.
Just looking at the maturity dates and benchmark bond target range sizes that are published in the debt management strategy of the budget, and I gather this year we're doing a lot of bond auctions in order to raise money for not only this year's deficit, but for previous accumulated debt that has come to term. And by my calculation, we will raise as much as $72 billion in 2-year bonds. Is that roughly accurate, Mr. Leswick?
I don't have the DMS, the debt management strategy, in front of me, but if you're reading it from the debt management strategy, yes, it is accurate.
Well, I mean, it is. It's not 100% clear, but that's basically in February they were to have an auction of $2 to $18 billion. In May, 12 to $18 billion. Another similar auction in May, August, and November. And if you add up those totals, it would be as much as $72 billion worth of 2-year bonds. I guess what interests me here is that they're only issuing $12 to $8 billion worth of 10-year bonds and $10 to $16 billion worth of 30-year bonds. In other words, they're issuing more than twice as much debt through 2-year bonds than they are through 10 and 30-year bonds combined. Now, this probably sounds a little bit arcane to the listener, but what strikes me is that now that we have such low interest rates, doesn't it stand to reason that we would want to lock in longer-term borrowing rather than shorter-term borrowing? I mean, if the debt that we are auctioning now will come to terms in 2 years. If interest rates, say, go up in 5 years, then the record low rates that we enjoy right now will be of no value because we will have extracted all of the benefit of it in simply 24 months. If we were to lock in on a 10 or a 30-year bond for a larger share of the debt offering, then we would be able to take advantage for as much as a generation of these lower interest rates. Can you explain why it is? I know you don't speak for Finance Canada's debt strategy, but can you perhaps give us some idea why they might have done that?
You do speak for Canada's debt strategy, and
well, I mean,
I know that this was discussions that have been held at Finance Canada.
So I don't author the debt strategy, but I don't author the debt strategy.
You don't author it.
So I'm not like superiorly intimate with the numbers that you're referencing, but I mean some principles in play, and I think the member is right. Is with effectively a yield curve that is flatter than any time in history. Why aren't we locking in at lower rates? And to some extent, we are increasing our volumes at the far end of the yield curve with introducing some of our ultra bonds, so 50 and 60-year bonds, and borrowing more at the longer end. However, I talked about cost and risk dynamics, so it's still cheaper to borrow at the shorter end of the curve. Likewise, I have to introduce, there are financial market considerations as well. So if you issued all your debt at the far end, what would happen is just global pension funds would just buy it all up and hold on to it till maturity. So we do have to be somewhat conscious about liquidity, repo operations and swaps and financial markets, which really need, some of the shorter term maturities to be able to, ensure liquidity of what is AAA paper. So I'm on the same track. It just there is a multidimensional consideration here.
But is it really our job to protect the liquidity of the lender? Isn't it really our job to get the best deal for the taxpayer, in this case, the borrower?
No, I mean we have to work with the Bank of Canada to ensure that one, liquidity is important for us too, because there's a need for some price discovery. So we need to know. What creditors and what the price is for shorter term yields. So we need to ensure the right kind of liquidity. We need liquidity in Canadian financial markets. So part of our financial sector policy and working with the Bank of Canada is to ensure that liquidity. We also engage in bond buyback operations, for example, so that when we don't feel that there is enough liquidity in the market, that we'll buy our bonds back at a premium and reissue them to ensure the appropriate churn. Again, to make sure that we have that price discovery on Canadian paper. So I don't disagree with you in the sense that we are, in the context of, the new government's infrastructure program and long-term liabilities, should we be borrowing more at the far end of the curve? It's like you buy you're purchasing a mortgage. You're tempted to buy, the 5 and even 10-year mortgage right now because it's cheap. So we're going through those same considerations.
So
very quickly, Mr. Poilievre.
We're told that now is the best time for governments to borrow because we have record low interest rates. But that would presume that money will be paid back before rates rise. A 2-year bond guarantees us low interest rates for 2 years. Based on your understanding of Finance Canada's projections, are the fiscal deficits that the government is assuming this year and next going to be paid back within 2 years?
So it's difficult to answer that question. I mean, we have it's a $650 billion borrowing program, of which this current year deficit projected to be in and around $30 billion is just one part of that. So I mean, it's difficult to say whether that deficit in particular is bought or paid for in any one particular period as we manage, that cash requirement within a larger debt management program. I mean, I appreciate what the member is saying. Absolutely, it's just difficult to answer the question directly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leswick. We'll move to Mr. Harvey. We can come back to you, Mr. Poilievre. Good line of questioning, Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are surrounding the liability on contaminated sites, and they're more around the assumptions that have been made with regards to the debt. So when you had previously stated that the liability is estimated for the future ongoing at around $5.8 billion, of which $3.5 billion is attributed to the 4 major projects or the 4 major sites, and we don't need to get into whether or not we should have ever acquired those sites as a government, because ultimately, number one, it's in the past. Number two, we probably didn't have any reasonable alternative. But my question is, I need a little bit of context around those assumptions. You know, what the 5.8 billion is assumed as with length of term, and what's included in that. Because when I'm looking at this, you've basically said that there's 2,400 sites total that have been evaluated at some level, and that there's 6,200 sites that haven't been evaluated basically at all. So if I was to say that 3.5 billion, this is just my own personal thought, if I was to say that 3.5 billion was attributed to the 4 major sites, that would leave 2.3 billion to be distributed over the other 2,400, correct?
In terms of what we've assessed so far, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I was to use that, and if I was to divide that on an average by the 2,396 other sites, that would leave an estimated cost per site of around $960,000 per site. So if I was to times that by 6,200 sites, that would mean that we have about $5.6 billion of unaccounted for debt that we haven't allocated. Right. I know that's a broad assumption.
No, well, the member has touched on an excellent point, Mr. Chair, and my colleagues from the Auditor General might want to weigh in on this. Number one, the way we classify sites is not random. We look at the sites where we suspect there might be significant contamination, environmental risk. So the big ones get assessed first. So what's left is the ones we're less worried about. So understand there is a hierarchy there. So you can't just take the numbers we have so far and extrapolate them over the unassessed sites. That being said, of the sites that are left, 6,600 or so, that if they haven't been assessed, we have not booked anything for them. One of the interesting questions around the new contaminated site standard is it forces you to extrapolate more than we had in the past. So if you have 2 sites that are identical or similar and you know what one cost, you should estimate based on the other one. So that's the discussion we've had with the Auditor General going forward, is how much do we have to extrapolate? But we haven't actually assessed a site yet. Really not much we can do there. The other bit I should say, in terms of the sites that are coming, there's a program called the Federal Contaminated Site Action Plan, and I would refer you to read about that because it does describe high priority, low priority, 0 priority sites as well as the unassessed to get a sense of what's coming. And there's actually a database out there on the contaminated sites of the government so you can see what's out there. There was money in the last budget to continue to clean up existing sites, but equally important to continue to assess the ones we haven't yet gotten to. And final point, Mr. Chair, the Parliamentary Budget Officer did do some work around what's the total package here. And the estimation that was done wouldn't meet accounting standards in terms of booking a liability, but it's interesting information to read so you have a sense of what else is out there. And my colleague has just flagged to me that I should mention it. I can't talk about contaminated sites without talking about AECL. Atomic energy is a big part of this as well.
Okay, that's fair enough. But so can you just elaborate a little bit on the 5.8 billion that we have booked? What are the criteria around that, like length of time? What's included in that 5.8 billion?
So it is the cost to actually clean it up. And if it's a multi-year project that goes 20 years into the future, like AECL is a long-term game to clean that up, as is Giant Mine. You would take the long-term expenses and actually discount them back to present value. So there's discount rates involved, there's interest rates involved, but it is the estimate, the present value estimate of the cost to clean up that site to meet current environmental standards.
So it would vary by site, because in a former life, I've bought a bunch of contaminated sites before.
We have some more we could sell you
from the private sector. But my question is that my understanding from that is that the length of time that we could be committed to these sites could vary from 5 years to 10 years to 30 years to 100 years, depending on what the environmental impacts that are assessed around it. So what I'm saying is when you book the cost, right, are you booking it based on a set amount of time with plans to renew that and revisit at another time? Or are you booking it on what the projected total lifetime expectancy is going to be to clean up that site?
The projected cleanup costs total to actually clean it up is what gets booked.
Okay.
That being said, there's always a caveat. If the decision is, you know what, we don't need to clean that up, we're just going to put a fence around it and put a security guard there. It's not that contaminated. I'm making up an example here. That's an operational cost. That's not really a liability. But if it's actually cleanup involved, we are estimating what it's going to cost to clean it up If it's 100 years of work, we will take the 100-year projection of expenses, discount them back to present value, and that's what we book.
Okay. Thank you.
A couple days ago or a couple weeks ago, Mr. Christofferson mentioned when we were talking about accrual accounting that Daryl Cramp, this was one of his areas. And when we start talking about mine cleanup and contamination and giant mine, I expect former Minister Fletcher to come rolling in here and go on a rant on this, because this certainly was one of his big areas of concern. And so we'll go back to Mr. Christofferson, please. And Mr. Christofferson, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. And I want to continue on this. Recognize I don't have drilling time, but maybe a little bit of probing time. I'll try picking up on the excellent questions of Mr. Harvey. I'm still concerned, given that we're talking billions of dollars here, and there's this transfer of debt that's going on between. I mean, as the financial people who are doing the macro eyes for us, is anybody there concerned about this as a growing concern? I know I am. I can give you examples in Hamilton of how situations are arising where land is polluted, and then suddenly it becomes a question of whose problem it is. And since it's supposed to be polluter pays, I want to hear a little bit more about this, because I would think this is a growing problem. And since we're talking about billions of dollars of debt, Canadians are assuming that they didn't incur. I just don't want to let it go so easily. So, Mr. Matthews, you look like you're ready to say something, sir.
I'll start, and maybe, I don't know who wants to help me out on this one, but it's an important question, Mr. Chair. A couple of points. These big liabilities especially, they're old. They do date back to a time when corporate, shall we call it social responsibility, the expectations were different than they are today. So the expectation, polluter pay, some of those concepts didn't exist way back when. But I guess the second point I would make, and it's probably the reason you're concerned, is when health and safety of Canadians are at risk, the government is the ultimate risk holder. So if a corporation packs up and leaves, and you can pursue various legal avenues, do what you got to do, but at the end of the day, oftentimes it's the government that's left holding the bag. Of the unassessed sites, one of the things that often comes up is who is responsible. It could be the federal government, it could be another level of government, or it could be the private sector. So in part of the assessment process, one of the key questions is who is responsible. And if you're into joint ventures and partnerships, sometimes it's shared and sometimes there's a debate. If you go back to, what's a good example, Sydney tar ponds, a lot of discussion about is it federal, is it provincial, is it shared, and there was a process not only to assess what the cleanup cost is, but who's responsible. So that is part of the assessment process. I know it's cold comfort to sort of say, we own these things now. That's probably not fair from a, what's just the Canadian taxpayer perspective. But at the end of the day, this stuff has to be cleaned up. And because of the rules at the time, Canadian government is the ultimate, and the taxpayer is the ultimate risk holder.
Well, in light of that, and I probably should know this, but I do not, is there a fund that polluters have to pay into, that the government, almost like like a workers' compensation, is there a fund that they collectively put into that money is then used to pay for these cleanups? Because something's got to change.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I'm not an expert in this area. I don't believe there's any sort of generic fund that people in certain types of industries have to, certainly not a government-held fund that they would have to contribute to. What would happen in current day, if you're a company involved in mining or whatever, where there's a risk of pollution, they are booking contaminated site liabilities just as we are. So they are actually booking the liability as they should for their books, for their cleanup. So they're recording the costs. Are they putting away money to allow them to clean that up? I'm not aware of any specific fund, or I don't think anyone here is.
I'm from Hamilton. I don't know an awful lot about mining, but I've been in public office long enough in Ontario that you have to know something about it. It's a big part of our economy, and I know that you can't do mining without generating tailing ponds. Tailing ponds in effect are pollution, and so it's still continuing, and I know this isn't the place to pursue it, but it is a good place to be talking about the dollar value of who ultimately is responsible, and whether or not you and the Auditor General are satisfied that the Canadian taxpayers' interests are well protected in this regard.
Maybe one final point for me. It's a question that certainly goes beyond my area of expertise, but environmental standards are different now than they were then. That helps, but it's not the end game. But also, there wasn't a good understanding of some of the impacts of these things way back when. And just by example, Giant Mine, I think people knew there was contamination there, but the assumption was it was going to stay frozen. It's all down below. It's up north. It's underneath the ground. And guess what? Changing temperatures, some of that stuff is starting to melt. So all of a sudden, the plan has to change in terms of how to clean it up. Really interesting area, but things do change. And it does come down to what's the oversight mechanism for industries in these areas, which again is not my area of expertise.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. We'll now move to Ms. Zahid, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Going through the public accounts, I've noticed a pattern of large variances between the total authorities available for use and actually the amount which was used. For example, in the Department of Citizenship and Immigration, the Department of Citizenship and Immigration has loans to immigrants and refugees that are authorized for approximately 68.4 million as per on volume 2, 7.7, and whereas only 1.2 million were spent, creating a budgetary difference of about 67 million. Another example can be found in the Department of National Defense, where national combat and support operations are budgeted for about 1.6 billion, whereas only 1.2 billion were spent, creating a variance of almost 350 million. A third example can be found in the Office of Infrastructure of Canada, where the new Building Canada funds, national and regional projects were authorized for 114 million, but only 11 million, or less than 1/10 of the authorized funds were spent. This seems to appear as a common theme of underspending of authorized funds or estimation of projected expenditures. What can be done to address these discrepancies? Or is there any specific reason as to why such a large variance is being seen?
This is an important question, so thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of points from me on this front. First of all, the way the parliamentary appropriation system works, it's illegal to overspend your vote. So number one, you have an authorized amount, and you don't want to spend right up to the penny because then you're risking overspending, which is against the law. So we don't. So some cushion is actually, we want some cushion. It is big cushion. The other thing I would say, when you're dealing with programs where take-up is important, so loans to immigrants, Veterans Affairs programs, any kind of grant and contribution program, the government is estimating how many people will come forward and apply, but at the end of the day, we are takers. And if the applications don't come in, you can ask, are we not advertising this properly? Did we miss, why did we underestimate those?
Sorry for interrupting, but you don't have some sort of, like, how these are estimated at the first time? Like, do you compare some facts from the previous years and your projections for the next year?
We'll look at previous years, but some programs by their nature, veterans programs changed last year, and there's emerging issues where increased take-up due to post-traumatic stress. So it is kind of hard to project those things. Other things are very easy to project, like you should be able to project your salary costs. That's kind of steady state type stuff. But what I'll call the serial lapsers, we have a few departments that lapse big dollars on an ongoing basis. Infrastructure Canada, the member highlighted, number one. They are, to spend money, they have to negotiate agreements with provinces and territories and municipalities. So they're really taking an estimate at the beginning of the year on how many agreements they might be able to negotiate, and they have to get cover in case they all come to fruition. But reality is negotiations typically take longer. Same thing with Aboriginal affairs. When you're into negotiations of land claim agreements, some settlements, they're projecting what might happen, and frankly they have to project the worst case scenario because it's illegal to overspend. And the third one you mentioned, national defense, which has been, it's usually around procurement. Defense procurement is a complex area, and again they have to assume, I guess we'll call it best case scenario in terms of how many contracts they can let and how much equipment they can buy. Historically, it takes longer than expected. So the big ones are normal, and they're I would call them serial lapsers. The same one pops up every year. The final one I would flag for you, because it's a little more complicated, Treasury Board Secretariat as a department manages things called central votes, where we're holding money for other departments. And there are things like that allow them to carry a certain amount of their operating budget forwards, that allow them to carry a certain amount of their capital budget forward. Those dollars lapse every year as well, and that's quite normal. But where you should look is where you've got a department that normally doesn't lapse dollars in a program, but all of a sudden lapses significant dollars, and you can say, why is that? And that's where I like to look, is where they've changed. The ones here I would say that you've highlighted are quite normal in terms of lapses.
No, but for the new Building Canada Fund, it's only 1/10 of the actual amount projected was spent. So the rest of the amount was, so that means that the money was there, but it actually did not flow out to the municipalities or whoever was.
Right, and again, applications, you have to negotiate agreements. You know, once you miss the construction season, if you don't get the agreement in place in time, you've lost the season for the next year. So infrastructure is a notorious lapser, and you know, my colleagues in finance, when they actually project the budget, they assume a certain amount of lapsing will occur because we want to kind of project the best possible spending. But from a departmental perspective, they have to assume the worst or best case scenario, depending on your perspective, to make sure they don't actually overspend what Parliament authorizes.
Thank you.
Okay. Time
do
is
you have
over?
one more quick one?
Yeah, so I will share my time.
Oh, well, you will come back to you because you're already over. We'll go to Mr. Polyev, please.
Back on the term to maturity of our debt, according to the budget, the average term to maturity of domestic market debt is 7 to 7.5 years. Yet, of the $133 billion in new debt issuances that came, that are being auctioned off this year, $92 billion is 5 years or less. In fact, the majority of it, or roughly half of it, is 2 years or less. Why in this low interest rate environment is finance shortening the term of debt rather than locking in low interest rates over a longer period of time?
I think it's a valid question. I just don't have a very good answer here today in terms of, yeah.
When we have questions like this, is it possible for the department, and I know it is, to come back with the answer to those questions? And would you...
Absolutely.
And if you could provide those questions to the chair or to the clerk of the committee, we will see that the answers of anything are circulated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please continue. Please continue.
I don't think I have anything to add because I think it is a valid question in terms of why we're borrowing more in the 2-year tranche. My hypothesis is around liquidity and some of our cost and risk dynamics against our entire $660 billion borrowing program. But the member's question in terms of exactly how we're matching our new cash requirements against our new borrowing program is a good one, and I'll follow up with the clerk with a clear answer.
Does the Auditor General audit the debt strategy of Finance Canada?
Mr. Chair, we did a performance audit a couple of years ago, I believe, where we looked a bit at some of the debt strategy. I don't have the details of everything that was in that, but we don't audit specifically that strategy, on a regular basis. But we did do a performance audit that looked at some of those issues a few years ago, as I recall. But like I say, I don't remember the details of it.
Just to say, it's internally within the organization. So we have our internal audit operations would do an annual audit of our debt management strategy. We have international organizations such as the OECD and IMF who do, I wouldn't call it an audit, but definitely an evaluation of our debt management strategy. Likewise, we do market consultations. I mean, we work very closely with the private sector in terms of how our debt strategy plays in financial markets.
That is the lenders.
The buyers.
The buyers, right, who are effectively lending us money, right, when they buy bonds?
Yes.
But their interests are the opposite of ours.
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, the lenders are diverse. I mean, there's obviously some lenders who have a lot of appetite at the short end of the curve because they want that that 1 or 2. But pension funds are dying for the long-term paper. They need, because they need to match their obligations with the appropriate duration. So
right, but they want the government of Canada to pay out more interest. We want the government of Canada to pay out less interest. If I am a lender, I want more interest. If I'm a borrower, I want less interest. So, I mean, I think there's some limit to how much we want to keep those so-called stakeholders happy.
Right. Mr. Chair, I just respectfully say that I don't think it's just the more or less interest argument. I believe, at the long end of the curve, they need the appropriate durations to match against their own liabilities. So this stakeholder group, the lenders, is diverse across the entire side of the yield curve. There's appetites on both ends.
The appetite for a government would be to seek shorter-term debt because it pays lower, the interest rate is lower in the short term while that government is in office, even if in the long run the cost to the Crown is higher by virtue of the fact that it would have to be reissued at higher interest rates later on. How do we protect against the short-term interests of a government trying to minimize its interest costs during its lifetime, during the lifetime of that government, balanced against the interest of the long-term financial interests of the Government of Canada, which is to keep debt servicing costs down for a generation?
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre.
Mr. Chair, just to say our debt management strategy is included as part of the budget. It forms part of the budget in terms of how we'll finance our cash requirements for the year, so just subject to some parliamentary scrutiny. And I would just come back to say, the government acts with integrity to ensure that, we're managing both those cost and risk dynamics so that we're not subject to any sort of rollover risk, or subject to, we minimize or establish an equilibrium to manage rollover risk.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Mr. Area and Mr. Harvey on the split.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Coming to contingent liabilities, we have about $443 billion. And I see that a good amount of it, close to $209 billion, is from Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. I know, Mr. Ferguson, that you audit Canada CMHC separately, but have you looked into the risk to the federal government for any problem that may be at the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation?
Well, certainly when we do the audit of Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, we would make sure that any contingent liabilities that they have are appropriately accounted for and reported. So, again, with a contingent, when you're looking at something that is potentially a liability, you have to assess it to first determine how much of it actually do we think is a liability, and that would get recorded in the face of the financial statements. And then you also look at it from the point of view of what else could there be that meets sort of all of the definitions according to the accounting standards of the amount of contingent liability that would have to be reported. So we would make sure that all of that was adhered to when we did the audit of Canada Mortgage and Housing.
No, I was thinking in terms of these financial crisis we had about 8 years back. If something like that happens, and if Canada CMHC is affected, that in turn will affect the federal government finances.
Well, and I think it's again, very important to realize that the entity of the Government of Canada includes Crown corporations that the Government of Canada controls, so CMHC. So anything that happens at CMHC would be brought into the consolidated financial statements of the Government of Canada as soon as that happens. So that I think is the advantage of the way the Canadian standards are established for governments. Is one of the first things that the standards do is they say you have to define what the government entity is, and it isn't just the consolidated fund. It's a consolidated fund plus a number of these Crown corporations that the government controls, and to the extent that there is any impact or any results from those controlled entities, it also affects the consolidated financial statements of the government.
And quick question to Mr. Matthew. Is there any thumb rule for providing contingency reserve, and what is the rationale behind it?
Sorry, I'm not on
contingency reserve. Is there in thumb rule what is the amount to be provided as a reserve?
Is there a rule in general? When you're dealing with specific industries, there might be best practices, but when you're looking at the consolidated entity of the Government of Canada, there's no rule of thumb that we can apply across the board. I do think...
Decision then?
That's what had an answer as well on the previous question. We'll get that.
Just be very quick. With respect to CMHC, it does provide in its annual report a full detail of its stress testing scenarios. So it takes its own balance sheets and stress tests them with various economic shocks. And one of the most extreme shocks is the U.S.-style housing collapse, where unemployment would spike by 5% and housing prices would decline by between 20 and 30%. And it shows you the effect on its income statement and balance sheet in and around about $500 million. All to say is that it establishes pretty big contingency or reserves to buffer against an event like that.
You mentioned the U.S. housing crisis. Right. Have you done the same thing for the Canadian housing market?
Yes, exactly. So it imposes a U.S. equivalent of a U.S.-style housing crisis. Excuse me, sorry, I wasn't clear. Of a U.S.-style housing crisis in Canada. So unemployment would go from 7 to in and around 11 or 12%, and housing prices would decline by about 20 and 30% harmonized across the country. And it shows the effect on the CMHC income statement. And you can see, based on that shock, what that would do, because as the Auditor General said, to the ultimate federal budgetary position. So, and bottom line, in case you do or do not go and read it, is that CMHC has these enormous buffers to protect the federal income statement, federal balance sheet against a housing shock like that.
I guess some questions for Mr. Leswick. You know, I like everybody else in this room. Maybe I shouldn't speak for everybody else, but I have a house mortgage, and I've never been ashamed to break that house mortgage, and neither have I ever been ashamed to break any long-term mortgage for corporate debt either. I've always been a firm believer that you should borrow over the long term, and as long as the benefits outweigh the penalty, you would break a mortgage in order to strengthen your own long-term position. And you would always finance over the long term, and over time you would refinance and pull that debt back out, provided you could invest that money at a higher rate of return than you were paying an interest on it on your mortgage. Do you see what I mean?
I did right up until the last statement.
So if you had a $300,000 mortgage,
yes,
and you had it financed over 30 years, and you paid that down over to 10 years, you had 10 years left on that mortgage, and all of a sudden borrowing rates were 2.39%, then instead of refinancing your home at 2.39% for the 10-year period that was left, you would pull your money back out and refinance your home for the full 30 years again, provided you could reinvest that money at a higher rate of return than what you would be paying in interest. You would still come ahead every day, right? So
I can't
I'm
argue
kind of
with
reinforcing
that, Mr.
a little bit of what
the
Mr.
government doesn't
Poilievre-
invest the money. That's the only.
I understand that, but what I'm going to ask, what I wanted to ask at the end of this is, would it be possible for you to provide us? I know that can be provided today, but would it be possible for you to provide us with an overview of the borrowing strategy, like a one-page, or two-page overview of the borrowing strategy for this year, in terms of length of time and the way that that's composed on both ends of the spectrum and the middle, in terms of debt strategy, compared, and also provide us with that for the previous 10 years.
Mr. Chair, absolutely. We do provide this as part of our debt management strategy. It is a very condensed document. To the member to the chair's left was referencing this document. So it does discuss exactly this kind of cost risk dynamics and whether the government has it right. But that's effectively its proposal. That's how it communicates its debt strategy. So we can definitely reference that and get that to the clerk.
It's okay?
Yep, that's good. Did you have another question, Mr. Harvey? All right, thank you. Mr. Poilievre, you had another question. We are going to break here and suspend in about 5 minutes. We have some committee business. 5 or 6 minutes. We want to take questions if you have them, but we will go to committee business. Mr. Poilievre.
So to build on Mr. Harvey's point, if it would be possible to indicate the rationale for the heavy focus on short-term debt issuances, that would be much appreciated by this committee.
I think it's very clear the committee is asking for more detail with respect to, as you're talking about, the short end of the curve. Yeah.
Yep. On CMHC, I don't know if I'm wrong, but I'm not aware of any insured party throughout our entire economy that pays no premium and no deductible, except for the Canadian banks with respect to CMHC. The home buyer pays the premium, the insurance premium, and in the event of a mortgage default loss, the Canadian taxpayer through CMHC insures that loss at no deductible to the bank. When I buy a home and I make that CMHC premium, I pay that premium. It doesn't insure me at all. It doesn't give me anything. In fact, if I lose my house because I default on my mortgage and there's a loss on the liquidation of my home, the insurance is there for the bank. The effect of this is that 100% of the profit of each mortgage issued in Canada goes to the bank or the lender, and 100% of the risk for CMHC-backed mortgages goes to the taxpayer. Do you consider possibly that this is a perverse incentive for lending, where the lender gets all the profit and the taxpayer gets all the risk?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I won't argue with the question or the logic that the member presents. I think it's something that we are looking at the department in terms of lender risk sharing. So there's an appropriate distribution of the benefits and the costs across the spectrum of that agreement. I mean, only to say that things like the mortgage-backed securities program allows the securitization of these mortgages, so that if you say the benefits or the exposures are spread not just to banks, but are held in mutual funds and pension funds, so that it's not just the lender that gets any sort of exposure benefit to that. But it's something but it's definitely something we're looking at.
But then CMHC is stamping those securities, is it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're not actually spreading the risk to others, we're bringing it back onto our book when we stamp them, right?
CMHC is stamping them, yes, and they're wholly backed by CMHC and in effect the government, so the risk is on us. It's just that the exposure, I guess to some extent, or the benefits, the exposure to the housing market is not just held wholly within the lending institution.
No, it's not held at all within the lending institution. It's held on the backs of the taxpayer.
No, I understand, Mr. Chair, what the member is saying, and it's something in terms of lender risk sharing and the CMHC products, both insurance and the securitization program. It's something that we're looking at.
But Mr. Leswick, just on that point, the government in the past has put in measures to secure the housing industry, or to secure even the mortgage and CMHC, lowering amortization periods of time, a number of other issues. What were those?
The government has acted 5 times in the housing market since 2012 to effectively to condense amortization periods, to increase down payment requirements, and so on and so forth, credit score requirements, in order to effectively mitigate any potential housing bubble or adverse housing shock.
And I agree with all of those decisions, but if we're asking the lender to act strictly as a rational creature, and he has a potential borrower of a mortgage sitting in front of him, that lender knows that in the event of default, it's someone else's problem. Right?
Well, I completely understand, which is back to your original, the way, excuse me, Mr. Chair, the way the member opened his comments, which is, deductibility, some distribution of that risk is exactly, what we're looking at as CMHC, as the housing market grows and household formation continues to slope on an upward trajectory. We need to take a look at our housing market and the distribution of those insurance risks. Absolutely.
Are you considering deductibles in the case of mortgage default loss, deductibles paid by the banks?
I can't speak to what's under consideration within the department, but the points the member is raising are good ones, and they're ones that we need to be mindful of.
Mr. Matthews, and then I think we're going to conclude. Mr. Matthews.
Just maybe, thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 quick points maybe. There's clearly some interest around this table in CMHC, and I believe it's within this committee's mandate, if interested, to call CMHC to have a discussion. So I just wanted to offer that as, because we've done the best we can here today, but I sense there's an appetite for more, is what I would say. I have noted 3 follow-ups. I just wanted to confer with you, Mr. Chair. CMHC, debt management strategy, and some information on the federal student summer jobs is kind of our 3 takeaways, and I think that's all we have left on our plate.
Those are yes, those are the 3 takeaways. But I would also suggest that if you leave this place and you think, you know what, I could have added more information to a different question, or I would like to provide this information in response to one, even though they may not be one of those 3, please avail yourselves of that, and you can expand on an answer. You can do any of those things. So thank you very much for coming. One never knows sometimes the direction that the committee may take as they hear from our guests. I know the Department of National Defense was one that we did have an interest in, and CMHC, this one kind of came on as we heard other testimony from you. So thank you to our Auditor General again. Thank you for the public accounts. I would just add this, that when you go through this as a new committee, these are handy to keep with you close throughout the year. There is an amazing amount of information on every department of government within these 3 big volumes of our national government and public accounts of Canada. So keep them close. They'll help you with other committee work if you're doing other committee work, and it's a real great resource. So thank you to our Auditor General and to our Treasury Board and to our Department of Finance. We appreciate your attendance here today, and we're going to suspend momentarily and come back quickly so we can deal with a business part of our committee.